The station was loud, but she heard nothing, just the pulse in her ears, steady and brutal. People rushed around, her heels clicking, suitcases dragging, voices rising and breaking like waves, but she stood still, a small figure swallowed by motion. Her hand tightened around the cracked leather strap of her suitcase, knuckles white, trembling. It was not heavy, yet her arm ached from holding on. A red scarf slipped from its edge, brushing against the cold tiles, and for a moment she let it drag, the color streaking like a wound across the floor. She lifted her eyes. Across the platform, through the blur of moving bodies, she saw him. Not clearly, not fully, just a silhouette in the crowd. His shoulders, his way of leaning against the railing, as though the world owed him calm. Her breath caught, sharp and unwilling. The loudspeaker called for departure. People moved faster. She stayed where she was, her feet nailed to the ground. A whisper of wind snuck in from the open doors, lifting strands of her hair across her face, brushing her lips with strands of salt and dust. She did not move them away. Her cracked watch ticked faintly on her wrist, seconds sliding past with the sound of betrayal. The glass was broken last winter. She remembered the night too well, but she never replaced it. Each jagged line across its surface looked like something unfinished, something unresolved. Like her. He hadn't seen her yet, or maybe he had and chose not to look long enough. Her chest burned with questions she didn't dare form. Was this chance, or was it a thread, pulling tight, inevitable? Don't, she whispered under her breath, though she wasn't sure if she meant it for herself or for him. Her fingers twitched, brushing the red scarf back into the suitcase, as if hiding it could erase what it meant. A memory, a promise, a weapon. The station clock struck again. She flinched. Around her, laughter broke. Footsteps echoed. The train hissed in readiness, but her world was narrowed to the space between her and him, the unspoken, the unfinished, the ache that once was love, and now tasted like something far more dangerous. Her lips parted, but no sound came. Not yet. The silence was a weight she wasn't ready to break. She let the suitcase rest at her feet. Her hands were shaking, but her gaze did not falter, and then he turned. His eyes found hers, steady, unreadable. A slow recognition crawled across his face. The crowd surged between them, tearing the moment into fragments. Her heart slammed once. Hard. She did not move. Not yet. The red scarf stayed hidden inside the suitcase, but its weight pressed on her. Like a secret, she stared at the floor tiles, cracked in places, and thought of her father. He used to say, "Nothing breaks on its own. It's always pressure, always time." She was too young then to understand. Now, every jagged line on her watch, every frayed edge of that scarf, every silence in her chest, reminded her of Amand, of how things break slowly before they shatter all at once. She shifted her grip on the suitcase. It was old, older than her. She remembered it sitting in the corner of her childhood room, her mother folding clothes neatly inside before every trip, tucking lavender sachets between the fabric so it would smell like home. Tonight, it smelled like dust and stations and the ghost of promises uncapped around her. The crowd moved with purpose. Families collided with laughter. Children ran into arms that held them tight. Lovers found each other with smiles that dissolved the distance of weeks. She watched, her lips pressed thin, her chest hollow. No one was waiting for her. No arms, no welcome. Just the echo of absence and the hum of trains that left too fast. Her stomach twisted. She could almost hear her mother's voice, but sharp, saying, "Don't carry what isn't yours." And yet here she was, dragging a suitcase full of years that weren't hers alone. She wanted to leave it, to walk away, to feel light again. But she stayed. Across the platform, he hadn't moved much. He leaned as though rooted, hands in his pockets, his gaze cutting through the distance like a thread tied too tight. He was watching her, not fully, not directly, but with a silence that carried weight. Intentional silence, the kind that said more than words. Her palms grew damp. She turned slightly, pretending to check the clock, but her heart knew he was still looking. A memory flickered. The last time she saw him, a door slamming, the scarf dropped on the floor. His voice, low but sharp, "You'll regret it." Her breath caught. She pressed her hand to her suitcase to steady herself, as if the old leather could anchor her trembling body. The loudspeaker cracked with static. Delay, the train would not leave yet. People groaned, checked phones, adjusted bags. She stayed silent, her throat tight. The delay stretched the moment into something unbearable, as if the universe was holding its breath with her. Across the crowd, His mouth curved just slightly, not a smile, not quite, something unreadable, almost mocking. She froze, one hand on the scarf tucked inside, the other gripping the suitcase. Her lips parted as if to speak, but no sound came. And still she didn't walk away. The delay stretched, and the station air grew heavy. The lights overhead flickered once, buzzing, like nerves about to snap. She tried to steady her breath, but each inhale caught against the sharp edges of memory. The suitcase at her feet felt like an anchor, the scarf hidden inside, like a pulse. He shifted finally, stepping away from the railing. The movement was small, but it pulled her eyes as if she had no choice. His coat hung loosely, too thin for the night. His shoes were worn, the leather cracked in places, as though he'd walked too far, too long. For a moment, she saw herself mirrored in those tired seams. A train passed on the opposite track, wind rushing through the station, lifting her hair across her face. She tucked it back with trembling fingers, but her gaze never left him. The air smelled of steel and rain, the kind that hadn't fallen yet, but promised it would. He reached into his pocket. Her body stiffened, but all he pulled out was a wallet. The way he opened it was almost careless, but inside she glimpsed something, a photo, edges curled from time. He closed it too quickly for her to see the faces, yet her chest tightened. Whoever they were gone, lost or left. Just like her. The loudspeaker echoed with another announcement, distant and drowned. She hardly heard it. Inside, she was split into one voice, begging her to turn away, to leave before he closed. The distance, another voice, quieter but sharper, urging her to stay, to face him, to demand the unfinished truth that bound them like thread. The station doors groaned as the first drops of rain slipped inside, cool against the heat of her skin. Thunder rolled, somewhere far but certain. The storm outside felt like the storm in her chest, inevitable. She bent down, running her hand along the handle of the suitcase. The cracked watch on her wrist ticked faintly. Time was still moving, even if she wasn't. She thought of her mother's voice again, don't carry what isn't yours. But what if what she carried was the only thing left of who she had been? Her eyes flicked back to him. He was closer now, though she hadn't seen him move. His gaze was steady, unreadable, not cruel, not soft, just there, as if waiting for her to decide. Was this fate drawing them together? Or was it his hand, weaving the strings without her seeing? The scarf shifted inside the suitcase, a flash of reed between the folds. Her fingers brushed it, hesitant, almost trembling. She lifted her eyes to meet his. Neither of them spoke, and in the silence, the question hung unanswered, unbearable. The storm had found its way inside the station. Rain tapped against the glass panes above, a soft drumming that bled into the hum of voices and hurried footsteps. She gripped the suitcase tighter, her fingers cold, the cracked watch pressing into her skin. Every second ticked louder now, as if time itself demanded an answer. She turned, just slightly, her body angling toward the exit. Her chest tightened with each step. 1, 2, she could leave. She could vanish into the rain and never see him again. But on the third step, she faltered. Her breath broke in her throat, and she turned back for one last look. He was still there, watching. Her eyes burned. She wanted to scream, to ask why he stood in silence when her whole body trembled with words unsaid. Instead, her hand slipped into the suitcase. She meant to steady herself, but her fingers brushed the scarf, dragging it into the open, red against the gray of the station floor. A ripple passed through the crowd, eyes darting, whispers surfacing. Strangers' glances lingered too long, some curious, some quietly judgmental. An older woman shook her head, murmuring to the man beside her, "Some people carry more than just bags. They carry silence." Her face flushed, but she didn't pick the scarf up, not yet. Across the platform, his gaze shifted, just barely, toward it, and then he moved, not quickly, but with intention. Each step carved into her chest. He stopped, within reach, close enough for the rain on his coat to brush the scent of metal and storm into her lungs. For a heartbeat, neither spoke. Then his hand reached down, not to touch her, but to lift the scarf. His fingers lingered on the fabric, careful, reverent almost. Her pulse screamed. That scarf had been hers once. Then no one's. And now, in his hands, it was something else entirely. Her lips parted, the words trembling but barely audible. Why now? He didn't answer. Instead, his eyes met hers, dark and unwavering, and he placed the scarf gently across her suitcase, not giving, not taking, just returning. The whispers around them thickened, judgment pressing like a wall. A child tugged at his mother's hand, asking too loudly, "Why is she crying?" The mother hushed him, pulling him away. Her throat tightened. She hadn't realized tears had reached her face. The scarf lay between them, red and alive with memory. Her body screamed to run, her heart screamed to stay, and still the silence held them in its merciless grip. The scarf lay between them, red as if it had bled into the floor. Her hands hovered above it, trembling, but she couldn't bring herself to take it. His silence was heavier than thunder, heavier than the judgment in the eyes around them. Then, as he shifted, something slipped from his coat pocket. A folded envelope. It hit the ground softly, almost unnoticed, but she saw the letterhead first. The name printed in dark ink froze her blood. The same company she had applied to last week, the same crest she had traced on the application form late at night. Her cracked watch ticking past midnight. Her chest squeezed as she picked it up before he could. Her eyes darted across the words, her name, scrawled, already inside. Not on a resume pile, on his desk. Her gaze shot back to him. He didn't flinch, didn't even try to take it back. His silence now was not ignorance, it was ownership. He wasn't just another face in the crowd. He was the one holding her future like it was paper he could tear. Her body shook. Memories flooded her father's words, echoing like a cruel reminder. Nothing breaks on its own. It's always pressure, always time. She heard it differently now. Maybe he wasn't just speaking of glass and walls. Maybe he was warning her about this very moment. The scarf slipped again, as if pulled by an invisible hand. She stared at it, then back at him. Her breath hitched when he spoke at last, his voice low, frayed at the edges. It wasn't mine. It was hers. Her world narrowed. The scarf, soft in her hands years ago, suddenly burned against her skin. Not a token of them, but of someone else. His daughter, gone, lost, and she had worn it without knowing, carried it like a wound that was never hers to claim. Her knees threatened to buckle. She wanted to throw it back, to scream, but the storm inside her collapsed into silence instead. The station clock struck, the sound slicing her open. Her cracked watch ticked faintly in answer, a cruel echo. The lines on the glass blurred in her vision, like scars too deep to fade. There was no turning back now. Whatever she thought, this was revenge chance. Unfinished love. It had twisted into something darker, something binding. Her suitcase handle felt sharp in her grip. She lifted it, not to leave, but to step forward. The crowd's noise blurred into nothing. One door opened down the corridor, leading into a waiting room lit harshly by fluorescent light. She hesitated only once, then walked through, and the world behind her shifted. The fluorescent lights in the waiting room hummed faintly, casting everything in a pale, almost sick glow. She stood with her suitcase by her side, her body trembling, her fingers pressed against the cracked watch, as though it were the only thing tethering her to the moment. The door closed behind him, sealing them in. For the first time, silence no longer felt like a shield, it felt like a blade. He moved closer, the red scarf still folded in his hand. She expected words of love or regret, the unraveling of a story she had been waiting years to hear. Instead, his eyes were unreadable shadows inside shadows. "You look like her," he said softly. Not cruel, not kind, simply final. The scarf burned in her vision now. His daughter, the one who had worn it last, the one she never knew existed until now. And she was nothing more than a reflection of that ghost. Her knees weakened, but she forced herself upright, her breath ragged. "So that's it. That's why you followed me. Not because of me, but because of her." His silence confirmed what words never could. The suitcase handle bit into her palm. Inside, it carried fragments of her applications, her worn-out clothes, her last pieces of hope. And suddenly, she understood. He hadn't come to love her, or to destroy her. He had come to choose her for reasons that had nothing to do with choice at all. Her father's voice echoed again. Nothing breaks on its own. It's always pressure, always time. Now she saw it clearly. She wasn't breaking, she was being shaped, pushed into a place she never thought she would stand. He stepped forward, offering the scarf, not as love, not even as forgiveness, as replacement, as memory. Her hand shook as she took it. The fabric was heavy, saturated with lives she did not live. She wanted to scream, to throw it back at him, but instead she folded it carefully, tucking it into the suitcase. A burial, not a gift. His gaze flickered, something unreadable passing through, perhaps loss, perhaps relief. The station clock outside chimed. She realized with a sharp ache that time hadn't stopped for her grief, her questions, her revenge. It had kept moving, pulling her here to this room, to this choice. She released the suitcase handle. For the first time, she let it fall. Not out of weakness, but surrender. Her rebirth wasn't in carrying weight, but in setting it down. Her voice, raw but steady, broke the silence. You won't see me again. He didn't stop her, didn't call her back, only stood there, shadows swallowing his face, as if he too knew the truth. This ending had never been theirs to rewrite. She walked out into the storm, hair whipping against her cheeks, rain soaking her skin until it felt like cleansing. The cracked watch ticked faintly, unbothered, unbroken. Not every stranger you help is meant to stay, but some leave you changed forever. The rain had thinned to a mist by the time she reached the street. The city glistened beneath the streetlights, pavements shining like mirrors of broken glass. She walked slowly, suitcase lighter now, though its weight hadn't changed. It was her hands that felt different, empty, but steadier. Each step echoed, not with hesitation, but with something quieter, acceptance. When she reached her small apartment, the world was still damp with spite. She placed the suitcase in the corner, not bothering to unpack. Instead, she drew the scarf out, folding it one last time. Its red was duller in the room's dim lamp, but it still carried a pulse of memory. Not his, not hers. Something in between. She opened the drawer of her desk and laid it inside, smoothing it with careful hands. Above it, she placed the cracked watch, its ticking softer now, like a heart learning to forgive itself. For the first time, she wasn't keeping them as anchors. She was letting them rest. She sat by the window, watching the street below where strangers hurried home. Their umbrellas bloomed and collapsed like fragile petals. For a moment, she envied their simplicity, till she realized her own storm had given her something they would never see. Her father's words returned, gentler than before. Nothing breaks on its own. It's always pressure, always time. She smiled faintly. Maybe she had broken, or maybe she had been remade. The echo of his face lingered, the man who looked at her not as love, but as reflection. It stung, yes, but it also clarified something she hadn't wanted to admit. Sometimes, love is not romance, it's recognition. She whispered it into the quiet, as though repeating it could ease the ache. She closed her eyes, and in the silence she saw him again, standing beneath the station's light, holding out the scarf not as a promise, but as a mirror. And she wondered if he too had walked into the storm, carrying something heavier than words. Her hand pressed lightly against the drawer, against what she had left behind. A strange comfort grew in her chest. Not peace, not yet, but strength, the kind born from losing what you thought defined you. The night stretched outside, infinite and unreadable. She leaned against the window, breathing in the cool air that smelled faintly of rain. Her reflection stared back at her from the glass, changed, unfamiliar, but hers. She exhaled slowly, a whisper against the silence. We all become someone's stranger, and the thought lingered, sharp and tender. Perhaps the truest question isn't who stays, but who leaves their echo behind.